Now, the war is in Ukraine, but the whole world is feeling the impact, especially at the dinner table. Food prices are rising once again. Even major food producers are considering drastic options, like India. Reports say New Delhi is thinking about importing wheat. And this is very significant. India has been self-sufficient in food grains, meaning we produce enough for our consumption and then some. We never had to import. But now the government is spooked. Wheat prices have gone up by almost 10% in the last 2 months in India. Inflation is at a 15-month high. So what is the solution? Maybe imports. Reports say the plan is to buy discounted wheat from Russia. And just to be clear, there is no shortage in India yet. We are not running out of wheat, so do not rush to your grocery shop. The idea of this import is to bring down prices. It's called a supply-side measure. If you increase the supply, the prices will come down. That is the idea. These reports first emerged in the first week of August. They said 2 things. One, that India should slash or abolish import duty on wheat. Right now, the duty is 40%. The report said it could be reduced or removed. That was one point. The second was this, that India could import wheat. Not private traders, but the government would import wheat. The centre had dismissed this report from the first week of August. They said there was no such proposal in the pipeline. But weeks later, the reports have re-emerged, and this time with more details. We will focus on 3 aspects of it. Number 1, how much are we buying and at what rates? Number 2, how will we pay for it? And number 3, how significant is this? The proposal is to buy around 8 to 9 million tons of wheat. Technically, we don't need that much to stabilize prices. We need around 3 to 4 million tons to do that. But the government reportedly wants a deep price cut, something that is noticeable. Now to discounts. Traders say around $25 to $40 per ton is possible. Now that discount is important. The imported wheat must be cheaper than the local wheat, or at least at the same price. If not, you will end up driving prices up further. How will India pay for these shipments? With dollars. You see, food is exempt from Western sanctions. You can buy grains, cooking oils and fertilizers without any blowback. India, in fact, already buys sunflower oil from Russia. We pay for it in dollars. So officials say the same strategy will be used for wheat. Now, full disclosure, the government has not officially confirmed any of this. It is based on information reportedly given by Indian government sources. Having said that, this conversation is not new. It began right after Russia invaded Ukraine. Both countries made up around 25% of global wheat supply, Russia and Ukraine, 25% of the global supply. So when the war began, prices shot up across the world. India responded by banning wheat exports. That was strike 1. Strike 2 was the weather. India's wheat output is around 10% less than what was projected. As a result, our stocks are down. India has around 28 million tons of wheat in government warehouses. It may sound like a lot, but it's 20% less than the 10-year average. So prices are up and stocks are down. It tells you why India is considering wheat imports. Now to the final question. How significant is this? In one word, very. India rarely imports wheat from other countries. Private traders import some of the fancy varieties, but the government does not. The last big purchase was in the year 2017. India's private traders bought around 5 million tons of wheat. But this deal with Russia is very different from that. It's not just private traders, it's also the government, and chances are there will be backlash. You see, food security is a political issue in India. And there is some bad history here. In the 1950s and 60s, India was not self-sufficient. We had to import food from outside. I'll tell you an anecdote from 1965. India was at war with Pakistan. Then Prime Minister Lal Bahadur Shastri went on All India Radio. He asked every Indian to sacrifice 1 meal per week. Why? Because that's how the food situation was. We've come a long way since then. Thanks to the Green Revolution, India has become self-sufficient. We could feed ourselves. And in the last couple of years, we expanded on that dream. India talked about feeding the rest of the world too, but from the looks of it, we haven't reached that stage yet, at least not yet. Dozens of countries do import food grains every year, so it's not unheard of, but the difference is our population. India has close to 1.4 billion people, so food security is also a strategic concern for us. In this changing geopolitical world, you can't depend on anyone for food, not even partners like Russia. It's been 3 weeks since a coup unfolded in Niger. Its president was toppled and arrested, the army took over, the people cheered them on, and now the junta is ruling the nation. It all happened so quickly that West Africa was left aghast. But now, they want to swoop in to save the day, aka reverse the coup. On Thursday, West African army chiefs met in Ghana. They discussed a possible military intervention in Niger. They say they prefer diplomacy, but if all else fails, they're ready to intervene militarily.
Let no one be in doubt that if everything else fails, the valiant forces of West Africa, both the military and the civilian components, are ready to answer to the call of duty. By all means available, constitutional order will be restored in the country. And this meeting today bears testimony to that.
Basically, the West African bloc is ready for war. It is also known as ECOWAS, Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS. The ECOWAS has sent troops in multiple nations before, so this will not be their first time. But this time, they are a little wary. There are a few reasons for that. The first is mobilizing the force. It has been done in the past, but there is no clear parameter yet. Gathering an army depends on the will of the members. The ECOWAS is 15 members. 3 of them have been suspended. The remaining 12 are willing to send troops. But they face some opposition at home, which brings us to the second problem, the second challenge, the number of troops. Any operation this big will need a lot of troops. It will also take weeks to pull together. But most ECOWAS members are under-equipped. They're also impatient. Plus, they don't want to get caught in a drawn-out conflict. The third problem is Niger's coup leader, General Abdurrahmane Tiani. He has worked for the ECOWAS before. Tiani served as a battalion commander for ECOWAS peacekeepers, so he knows what an ECOWAS military intervention would look like. Chances are he will be prepared for it. And challenge number 4, this could destabilize the region. Any attack on Niger will destabilize the entire region. Let me pull up a map for you. The area highlighted is the Sahel region. It stretches from Senegal on the Atlantic coast to Eritrea on the Red Sea coast. Niger is located here. Now, the Sahel is not a very stable region to begin with. There are famines, terrorism, rebellions, and human trafficking. Plus, there's drugs and arms trade. So if a war breaks out, all hell breaks loose. There will be civilian casualties, hundreds of them. People will escape to the bordering states. There will be a huge influx of refugees and terror groups will take advantage, so terrorism will grow in the region. In short, the Sahel region will become more unstable. And this will spill over to the rest of Africa, so military intervention can have stark consequences. What are the other options? Well, the first one is a special forces operation. Basically, they won't send a full-fledged army, but a smaller force. They could also ask the US and French forces in Niger to help. Another option is aiding a counter-coup. Mohamed Bazoum won the 2021 election with 56% of the vote, so he may have some support left. Plus, there are divisions in the military too. They may not all be united behind the coup. Regional powers could exploit that. If nothing works, there's always sanctions. ECOWAS has taken a strong stance against Niger. They can still continue with the sanctions and call for a return to civilian rule. The junta says it is willing to discuss that, but they haven't mentioned any time frame. So the big question now is, what will ECOWAS do? Will they go to war or will they talk to the junta?
You will put in place a plan to ensure that the standby force is activated and that democracy will be restored in Niger. If presidential guards in Guinea and Niger, I'll use the word, take hostage their president, nobody, and let me repeat, nobody in West Africa is safe.
When the coup happened, ECOWAS had set a deadline for the junta, surrender or we will make you. Well, that deadline is long past. Now, if they do not go in, it will hurt their credibility. They have drawn a red line. They will have to find the political will and the means to honor it. And now let's move on from antiquated outlooks to something actually ancient: dinosaurs, or rather their parents. Some scientists in Brazil have found the ancestors of the giant lizards, and it may not be as formidable as you think. Last year, a complete fossil of the dinosaur's predecessor was found. It was a 1-meter-long skeleton, quite tiny compared to its eventual offspring. But the fossilized little rabbit reptile, that's what the scientific name means, has given us some big clues about how dinosaurs evolved. It also helps solve some mysteries about the giants that once roamed the earth. Here's a report.
Say hello to the Venetoraptor gesani. This 1-meter-long tree lizard roamed the earth about 230 million years ago. The images you're seeing are scientific recreations made possible after the discovery of some fossils last year. The fossils were found in Brazil, and they were some of the most complete remains of the Venetoraptor gesani ever discovered. The creature was part of a species we know very little about. They're called lagopetids. That means rabbit reptiles. To find one of their fossils intact was a breakthrough.
The point is that we know very little about the lagopetids. This animal with this new discovery also allows us for the first time to have an idea on how these animals looked like. For the first time, we know how the faces of these creatures looked like.
That was one of the Brazilian scientists who discovered the fossil. It was found in southern Brazil last year, and it was a novel discovery. While humans have found numerous dinosaur fossils, we haven't really dug up too many of these creatures, mostly because they're small and delicate compared to gigantic dinosaur skeletons. And there's a reason for that. These creatures are a sort of missing link, a precursor to two types of dinosaurs, the land lizards and the flying ones, dinosaurs and pterosaurs. Pterosaur isn't exactly a common name, but anyone who's seen any dinosaur movie knows them. Giant flying reptiles like the pterodactyl. That species is technically separate from dinosaurs, no matter what the Jurassic Park movies may tell you. These winged lizards are the earliest known vertebrates to take to the skies, the first known creatures with a spine that could actually take off and land. Pterosaurs have always been a bit of a mystery, because it was hard to understand how gigantic lizards learned to fly. Well, the newly discovered Venetoraptor gesani fossil has helped answer some of these questions.
By gathering all of this new information on this animal's anatomy, for the first time we can see the precursors of the pterosaurs in a very clear way. That by itself is a very important discovery. So we observed that the degree and morphological variation of these precursors of the dinosaurs and pterosaurs was much greater than we had imagined.
That's a technical explanation. The full version has been published in the journal Nature. But here's a simpler version. The researchers say land dinosaurs and flying ones started separating much earlier than expected, and the Brazilian fossil was from an ancestor of the flying pterosaurs. It was small, light, with a hooked mouth and long limbs. The scientists believe this helped the Venetoraptor gesani climb trees. They think the rabbit reptiles would live on branches and hop from treetop to treetop. Their long limbs eventually, over millions of years, evolved into scaly reptilian wings. And that's how the flying pterosaur creatures came into existence. It was a long process that began millions of years ago. It's another reason why dinosaurs and pterosaurs should not be mixed up. This is a simplistic version of the discovery, and there's much more research to be done. But it's one more giant, dinosaur-sized step towards understanding our planet better.
After talking about dinosaurs, let's talk about the fate they all met with: death. That's what our next story is about. Slightly morose for a Friday, I know. But it's a grave affair worth talking about. Philosophers have long pondered it. So have physicians. Ancient civilizations were obsessed with death. How did they perceive death? Ancient Egyptians believed dying was the most significant thing one could do in their life. But in Mesopotamia, they called death a wage of sin. For them, death was dark stuff. What about the ancient Chinese? They believed death was a prolongation of life. If I were to explain it to Gen Z, kind of like how Facebook accounts live forever. Well, wait, Facebook is ancient too. I mean Instagram, that's the app definition of modern. Speaking of which, how would the modern world define death? In today's day and age, death often means a forever life in the digital realm. Our videos float on the internet whether or not we walk the earth. Our angry comments on YouTube exist forever whether or not we like them. Death imitates life, so it only makes sense that now death itself is going digital. Many people in China would agree. You see, they're now resting in tech. Once people die, their ashes are stored in a compartment of a large room, kind of like inside a safe of a bank. All the walls are covered with electronic screens, which display pictures of the deceased or the things they love. It sounds absurd, but people say it personalizes cremation. But that isn't the main goal behind this. The real aim is twofold. One is to save land, which would otherwise be used for burials. Beijing wants to reduce the land occupied by cemeteries by 70% till 2035. So the government is all for digital burials. The second aim is to make the process more affordable. Now, China leads the world in funeral service demand. In 2020, its market was worth $35 billion. It is predicted to reach $56 billion by 2026. What can we say? Death is a real money maker. It is taking a toll on people's pockets. An average funeral in China costs about 45% of a person's annual salary. The global average is 10%. People even take a graveyard loan to fund funerals. So digital cemeteries are unconventional, even bizarre, but they are affordable. Just this year, at least 500 such digital plots have been sold in China. In fact, people across the world seem to be interested in them because funerals are not expensive just in China. In Japan, they cost more than 68% of an average person's annual salary, 68%. In Germany, 16%. In South Africa, 13%. In the UK and the US, about 12%. Sure, they're not expensive everywhere. In India, for instance, they cost only 2% of a person's average annual salary. In Russia, 1%. So digital funerals may not make sense in all countries, but in some, they have birthed the industry for death. So-called death startups are dying to get into the business. No, their employees do not go around murdering people. The world has enough freelancers doing that. These startups operate in the arena of death. Some services hold online memorials for the deceased. Others curate an online mausoleum, basically a digital twin of physical burials, where clients can get buried on virtual islands of their choice, even choose its weather conditions perhaps. Basically, if you live in a hot city but hate it, maybe in death you can enjoy a cool breeze and sip pumpkin latte. Other startups are also creating AI replicas of the dead, which mimic a person's voice and likeness and help someone live forever in digital form. But death startups are not just for the afterlife. A UK-based startup helps people with insurance and digital legal documents to ease the post-death paperwork. At least in death, one should get respite from that paperwork. Another startup helps people write their will. A Netherlands-based startup offers another kind of service. It helps cancel subscriptions and accounts of a deceased person. Now I understand how all of this must sound. On the one hand, these services sound helpful. If that's a stretch, maybe remotely interesting. But for most people, these startups seem to be mocking death. After all, death can be a traumatic experience for most, not just for the deceased, but also for their families. It is traumatic, it is emotionally taxing, and the cyber death industry knows this. It battles this challenge regularly, but here's the thing. Trends say that the younger generation cares more about practicality than customs. Many don't care about being one with the soil after death or about the feng shui of their burial ground. To them, digital death eases the pain of mixing grief with paperwork. It helps them talk to a loved one they have lost. It stops them from spending a bomb on funerals. Perceptions around death are changing. And in this, we're offered a reminder. No matter the definition of death, it varies across cultures and changes with time. At the end of the day, the end of anyone's life is simply defined by how they view it. So what appears dystopian today could be the future of death. Even if that means a picture of BTS or Shah Rukh Khan on a burial collage, Digital death is strange, but it could help lift your spirits. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. The Indian Space Research Organization has released images of the moon captured by the Vikram lander. It is the last leg of its journey to the moon. The touchdown is expected on the 23rd of August. In Malaysia, a private plane came crashing down. 10 people have been killed, including all on board. But it's not all grim news. Here's something to cheer you up. In Bolivia, puppies donned a dapper look to receive blessings at a church. And finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1920, the US Congress ratified an amendment that granted women the right to vote. This milestone was achieved after decades of struggle and protests. With that, we call it a wrap. Thanks for watching. Have a good weekend. We'll see you tomorrow.
Sí, lo quiero cesar, pero si le suelto el brazo se va.
Los animales quiero dar gracias a Dios.